Sundays in St. June, Book 2 by Blue Bastard. Thursday p.m. Setting the Sun. Chapter 8. Sunset knew she was going to have a difficult time trying to meet with Fluttershy, given how much of a wallflower human Fluttershy was. The unicorn could only imagine the degree of shyness that the pony person would be. Yet, that was the only constant Sunny could feel that she was assured with regards to what she knew of the chiffon-haired female, as something she had experience with. Often, during those rough times, shortly after her place as Caroline High's Chimera Bitch had been torn down, all she had in terms of friends was the 5 students who befriended Twilight. Sunset wondered what her friends would be as ponies. For the most part, her only clues, aside from their personality, had been their hybrid forms. Even then, aside from the pony ears and absurdly long, instant ponytail hairstyles, the only non-human features any of them gained were the wings on Rainbow and Fluttershy. Off of Sunset's own guesses, she easily predicted the subspecies of Applejack, Rarity, and Rainbow. But she was of the opinion somehow there had been some mistake when it came to Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy, and that the latter had been given the former's wings. It was a logical guess, since Pinkie was hyperactive and managed to move at speeds beyond comprehension. On the other hand, Fluttershy was much more of a flower child, in that she had natural affinity for animals. Odds in hiding 3 or 4 of her friends in her backpack during the days when she had no human friends, which had largely been Sunset's fault, so it seemed as she had been an earth pony, and somebody had given her Pinkie's wings instead. It had sure been a surprise to see Fluttershy was really a Pegasus, so her human counterpart's hybrid form had suggested, thought Sunset, herself a hybrid of sorts now in both worlds. As a human, she still had equine blood, a pony's hearing range, and her magic. Here in Equestria, she was stumbling over being more culturally attuned to that of humans than the social norms of her own race and species. On that note, what of the possibility she wasn't even the first? Sunset still lacked a definitive answer to whether or not Musica Allegra had traveled into the human world through unknown means, which in turn left her unsure that Tavi was entirely human herself. So many questions Sunset would have liked to answered, but if only— "Stop!" cried out a familiar voice, holding Sunset at her tracks, as did a butter yellow hoof connected to a Pegasus. Sunset could have sworn wasn't nearby a second ago. "Huh? Fluttershy, where did you—" startled Sunset, but glanced down and understood immediately. Right in front of the ponies was the mama duck and her ducklings. Sunset had to question why the little flock had to cross at that specific point, at that specific moment. But she did so eternally, as to not offend Fluttershy. "You should really be more careful, Sunset," said Fluttershy after the ducks were safely on their way. "You never know what you'll encounter if you're not keeping your eyes on the road." Sure, thanks for the tip," replied the unicorn, sheepishly grinning and having to accept the advice on the obvious. "You're welcome. Now, I'm sure you're going this way to see me?" Yes. How did you know?" Fluttershy grunted. "Generally, ponies don't come this way unless they're coming to visit. My house is somewhere close to the Everfree, so unless you have business in the forest, I figure I'm the reason you're here." "You live near the Everfree forest?" skeptically asked Sunset. It made no sense why would any pony even want to live remotely like Fluttershy near a forest full of dangerous creatures. The Pegasus seemed to read Sunset's mind. "Most of the animals in the forest aren't really aggressive towards ponies. They stay in the forest and ponies stay in town. Besides, a lot of the creatures in the forest are also my friends, so it's beneficial for them to have me live nearby if they need my help." Sunset does nod in fog understanding. Sure. Anyway, the main reason I came to see you is, well, just that. After spending some time with Twilight, Pinkie, Applejack, and Rainbow, I figured I might as well spend time with you, if only because I'm friends with that other version of you. Sunset tactfully decided to leave out her ulterior motive for a visit. First, I probably wouldn't have liked being used to get dirt on another pony as well. "Oh, to be honest, I am sort of curious about that other Fluttershy Twilight mentioned having met on the other side of the mirror. Of course, she only spent like 3 days with her, maybe less, so I didn't want to be too intrusive about the matter." Pegasus seemed to shrink back, bashfulness subtly influencing her to use the overhang from her bangs as a shield to hide behind. Definitely Fluttershy. That says it with a smile. Well, I spent lots of time with the other version of you, so if you want, I'll try to answer your questions as best I can. How wonderful! Exclaimed Fluttershy, her wings open in excitement. I was just about to have tea when I saw you collide with the ducks, so we can chat over the fresh pot I made. That does sound wonderful. As it turned out, Fluttershy practically lived in a cottage that was designed more for her animal friends than her. Perched on top of a small hill and only accessible directly by crossing a bridge over a small pond, Fluttershy's house seemed perfect for the chiffon-haired mare. Inside it proved to be more spacious than it looked from the outside, with a large room and stairs leading up to a second floor. It could have contained more than her bedroom and company bathroom. The bottom floor, aside from the aforementioned receiving living room, had an attached kitchenette that was well furnished, despite Sunset not being clear on just how Fluttershy made a living, and a guest room on the side. Angel, I'm back. Oh, Angel's here too? Asked Sunset, curious as to what Fluttershy's brother looked like. Yes, of course, began the Pegasus, but was cut off by a loud squeaking noise. Sunset's head snapped in the direction of the noise and saw a small bunny dressed like a hardcore action hero with some crudely assembled weapons. Then it occurred to Sunset that, just as how Spike didn't translate over to Missile Riff as a pony, clearly Angel was also an exception. The Angel personas of both worlds obviously viewed like those violent action films. They certainly had Fluttershy counterparts who disappeared with such hearings. With this world's Angel Bunny decided to go all Rambo on her butt. In response, the screaming vermin about the last of her face, Sunset could only wonder, why didn't I go see Rarity instead? For 9 years, Raspberry's self-esteem rarely was anything above the point of self-hatred. Not just because of her fearsome powers, but because she simply didn't like being reminded of her relation to Sombra every single time she had to look at herself in the mirror. Of course, after she found herself accepted by the most important ponies in the country as a friend, acceptance of her real self came shortly after. Now it didn't pain her to look at her true appearance in the mirror. She still felt more comfortable in her normal guise, all the same. With all that in mind, Raspberry never expected to be put into position of her reflection giving her problems. It was the actual mirror itself that coldly reminded her that she walked a different path than everybody else. Well, it's unique, I'll give it that, said Raz, voicing the only words she could actually find to describe the magical artifacts he'd been brought out to see. And certainly Sombra's too, added Celestia, with Twilight nodded in agreement. Obviously, they'd been hoping for their local dark magic expert to have a more detailed first reaction to the mirror, given it allegedly was powerful enough to cross the boundaries of time and space. The Unicorn sighed. I know that wasn't what you wanted to hear, Your Highness. Please, we're all princesses here, pointed out Twilight. We don't need to be so formal. Right, anyway. Ladies, I know that wasn't what you wanted me here to say, but yes, I can certainly feel his presence and the magic in the mirror. It's not immediately clear just what he did to it or what even the mirror does. Sunset Shimmer, who I'm sure you remember from the little incident you had with her yesterday, placed this mirror as a portal between worlds. For a moment, Raspberry wondered where she did the right thing in telling Princess Celestia about the tense standoff between herself and Shimmer. She wasn't sure about the recently returned unicorn's intentions, but she didn't want to bring her Celestia's wrath over something as trivial as that. And Celestia let the matter rest as she continued speaking, indicating she was of the same mind at that point. This one in particular apparently shares the same destination as Putnam's mirror, which until now was thought to be the only link between the worlds of ponies and humans. Was this the place where Sunset came from, right? Raspberry asked. Of course, Celestia had already given her the basic rundown about her wayward pupil and why she was suddenly back. So does any pony want to kill me in on how all this relates to her stalking me? Raspberry had noticed Sunset at it again today, moving with the crowds of Ponyville. Her cold, calculating cyan eyes never leaving her. Twilight glanced at Celestia with uncertainty. With a nod from the senior princess, Twilight turned that look over to Raspberry. Celestia told you about her foster sister, my human counterpart back in that world, right? Raspberry nodded, no stranger to terrible nightmares herself. Sunset seems confessed that you are the one causing her nightmares. Raspberry's mouth dropped to open as he stared at Twilight in disbelief. What? What possible basis could she have to deduce that? Sunset gave me a very detailed description of her sister's tormentor. Twilight chewed her lip, which also happened to be a perfect description of your, other form. Raspberry promptly brought her rear down, suddenly finding it difficult to stand. She was back and forth between the two other princesses, meeting their gaze with wide eyes. Raspberry always saw the accusing scares of a town, ponies, a dreary town. I wouldn't. Twilight, you know I wouldn't. A white hoof quickly found its place on her shoulder. Raspberry realized he was shaking. Relax, Raspberry, said Celestia. Twilight and I do not believe you are capable of doing such a thing intentionally. Ah, there's the catch. Celestia's last word echoed in Raspberry's mind. Seeing the change in her face, Celestia continued, It is what you once said. Dark magic does not play by the rules of normal magic. It's entirely possible dark magic has different effects on the dimensional barriers than regular magic. Twilight added. In fact, Sombra was able to use dark magic to create his own mirror portal, and operates on different rules than Princess Platinum's is evidence to that. Furthermore, your own dark magic powers are still not entirely under your control. Your recent trip to Lonesome Dove has been discussed to death, Raspberry exclaimed, staring at her host once he realized she was shouting. She felt a familiar wind draped across her back, and looked appreciatively at Heliodor. Even that was a pretty isolated incident. If dark magic has crossed the borders of time and space to attack a human, intentionally or not, it could threaten reality itself. Which is why it is vital we investigate this mirror thoroughly, Celestia said, giving Raspberry a calm, grave look. If we don't get to the bottom of this, more than just one innocent life may be at risk. You're the only one with the ability to uncover Sombra's machinations. Gathering his strength, Raspberry stood and gave Celestia a confident look as she could muster. You're right, she said, taking another glance at the accursed looking glass. But first, let's find a way to move it. We're going to be unlocking this thing's secrets. I'd rather do it in a controlled environment. Sunset slowly started to wake up, not sure what was going on. The last thing she could remember was visiting Fluttershy. More specifically, her pet rabbit Angel deciding to latch itself onto Sunset's face, like some sort of sci-fi alien facehugger, and not letting go, until Fluttershy had given what she later described as the stare to the rodent. After that, having tea with the Pegasus had been quite nice. They talked a bit about Fluttershy's human counterpart, during which the butter Pegasus was saddened with her human self's relationship with her parents, who wasn't as happy as her own. Everything that happened after that was fuzzy to Sunset. Like she had been hit with a steel pipe. Oh shit! Intelligently sounded Unicorn, really screaming to her host despite the pain. For whatever reason, some pony must have knocked her out when she had gotten back into town. Evidenced by the change in her surroundings, she had been taken and dumped into a bedroom. Immediately, it was a well-kept bedroom, and had been tied down, restrained, or must have at least stabbed. As had been the case the last time she had been hit with something behind, it didn't change the fact she had eventually been kidnapped. Is it because I'm from the human world? Or because some pony knows what I did all those years ago? Or is it even worse than that? Loud shouting could be heard from outside the door. Sunset couldn't tell if she knew the voices. She probably didn't, given that the only ponies she talked to were far numbered less than 10 to the sound. One of them was clearly more pissed off than the other one. You did what? I had to. You know what she could tell us? She could validate everything we know. For the record, I had absolutely nothing to do with the auctions. A third voice added itself to the others. The arguing got louder and harder to make out, so Sunset dared to put an ear to the door. She suddenly heard one of the angry party members stomping towards the door, and Sunset moved away, just in time before it could be swung open forcefully. She couldn't believe the pony who had stood in the doorway. Deputy Sandalwood? Gasped the stunned Unicorn. There's no question about it. Despite being a pony, the mayor looked virtually identical to the cop for the Equestrian County Sheriff's Department, and had visited her shortly before the whole incident with the club. Brown hair, in the same general style, and those distinctive violet eyes, tied together with a tan fur coat that almost looked like human skin tone. She had to be Sandalwood's pony counterpart. Oh, have we met? Asked Sandalwood. No, I mean, yes, it's sort of complicated, stuttered Sunset, unable to form a cohesive voice. Technically, she's not the human version of you, Sandy, drawled a familiar, weary voice, trying a pronunciation of human to emphasize it. Sure enough, Octavia came to view. She's already done it with me, though to be fair, the princess did try to cover for her. Really? Exclaimed Sandalwood, a wide grin punctuating a strange nose that could only be described as a squee. The moment was short-lived, however, as the tan pony recollected herself. I mean, that's great now, but the fact is, Lyra still kidnapped somebody out of whim! Octavia nodded before turning to Sunset. I do apologize by that. When I was talking to Lyra this morning, I sort of let slip a few details of our previous conversation, as it were. So she figured out you're from this human world she and Sandalwood here are obsessed with. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Sunset replied, only to get a particular glare from Octavia. I would appreciate if you did enlighten me, the other pony stated simply. Gold tone in her voice reminded Sunset of the week she, Twilight, and Tavi pretty much given each other a cold shoulder after the whole incident with the club. It wasn't anything she wanted to relive again. Trying to hit me from behind again? Asked Sunset in turn, more to any pony who was listening than specifically Octavia. Though the other pony was the one that reacted, I hadn't expected Lyra to go so far. Octavia said sadly. I get the feeling things got off on the wrong foot, Sandalwood interjected. You think? Look, Sandalwood, Lyra probably didn't mean any harm, the other pony mid, but she also tends not to think things through when she's excited, like, okay, well, have you met Piggy Pie? Yes. Basically, that happens. Ah. Just then, Lyra stepped into view, making a very crowded front of the bedroom. Her horn was gold with a yellow aura, holding a knife back to the side of her face. Yeah, sorry about knocking you out with a 2x4 and, well, kidnapping you. Sandalwood just now reminded me why that's not a good idea, if you're wondering about the ice pack. Sunset shook her head. Look, what do you ponies even want from me? All I got is that you think I've got the answers to whatever you want to ask about humans, so you dragged me here. But is that all you want, to ask me some questions? Sandalwood blushed slightly, while Lyra's head bobbed up and down to point her head with just a motion blur. Octavia turned face huffed. Well, that's that way of saying yes. Simmered aside. Fine, I think I can answer a few. She started. Before she remembered, this was Pony Octavia. One might possibly know things not in any documents Sunset had read on history of one Musica Allegra. But I get to ask some questions of my own, got that? Fair enough, I suppose, answered Sandy. I fail to see how this is any better than where it was before, commented Twilight. While the three princesses had agreed Demira needed to be moved, Twilight had not exactly been supportive of the idea of moving to what amounted to a different part of the Everfree ruins. In this case, Demira had been relocated to the only location in the area of any recent importance, Raspberry's old safe house. Oh, come on, it's perfect, replied Raz. He tore a cheaping agreement from his place on the old bird stand. I still come out here occasionally to make some crystals to Verity or something else wants fake precious stones. So I still maintain the defensive measures, and it's a closed structure, so no pony could get in, even if they knew what's in here now. Or they are too tall, of course, added Celestia with a laugh from outside. At one time, Raspberry had claimed that one still standing cottage in the ruins as her own. It had been just the right size for her to have forestry operations, and now the way of civilization, no pony would really notice the signs of life in the otherwise dead ex-capital. However, structurally, the cottage was the exact same as it had been 1,000 years ago. Back then, it wasn't normal for royalty, much less alicorns, to visit the lower-class residents. Thus, Celestia was in fact too large to even fit through the door, as the top of the doorframe only came up to her withers. Raz herself had only cleared the ceiling by about a foot. so still more in the twilight. Her slightly larger frame and horn making it so she had to turn her head at an awkward angle to get through the doorways. Or that too, snickered Raspberry. But seriously, I'll need to get this thing into working order if we're to learn anything from it. Wait, how do you know it's broken? Asked Twilight. Some time ago you didn't even believe it was a portal! I can gauge its magic. Raz tapped her horns to remind Twilight. Same way you knew something was wrong with me back when our horns accidentally touched. Oh yeah, when I was more interested in examining how Heliodor could perch on your horn. Twilight laughed. Heliodor rolled his eyes into chuckling mares, reminded of one of the few times he didn't like being the center of attention. Ignoring the bird, Twilight continued. Anyway, how do you plan on fixing it? Well, it's not really broken. After all, I was able to get Sombra through to Equestria, presumably it'll allow her back through. But that's all I really can do. Sombra hasn't touched this mirror for well over 1,000 years. I can't say for certain. A second possible dark force may have exerted itself on this thing. Maybe it was Nightmare Moon's magic, said Celestia. If Sombra had left the mirror when he went to take over the Crystal Empire, it would have been sitting in the castle when my sister had our little fight. Raspberry nodded. That would do it. In fact, I think Sombra knew about it too. A solitary eyebrow made its way to Celestia's ethereal mane as he strained to get a better look into the abode. Sombra knew about the coming of Nightmare Moon. Yeah. Don't ask me how, but Princess Luna and Nightmare Moon are clearly depicted here as separate entities. Using her hoof, Raz directed Twilight towards the two blue alicorns carved into the mirror. They're both here, Twilight called out to Celestia, along with you, as we all guessed, in Queen Faust. My guess is that these are what keep the mirror stable, theorized Raz. I can sense dark magic having been stored in them, like some sort of balancing act. But after 1,000 years, plus neglect, abuse, and interference from other powers, it's pretty drained. But would it be a good idea to try and salvage it? I'll see what I can do. Based on what I can see about the mirror's enchantments, only a pony of dark magic as skilled with Sombra can control it. Looking for every pony, the only living being who fits that description is yours truly. I think we need another pony's help, said Celestia. After all, such as Sarah knew enough of this mirror for the human world. She was able to come through it. But she's no dark magic prodigy. Given she's also trying to understand what's going on between realities. Her knowledge on the subject should be of great assistance. Great idea, exclaimed Twilight. She can get her answers at the same time we do. It'd be perfect. What do you mean you don't know what happened? Shouted Sunset. May's unicorn sat on a relatively comfy green armchair in Lyra and Sandalwood's living room, facing Octavia and the aforementioned ponies on a simply colored couch. The room was moderately decorated with a fine wooden coffee table in the middle, complete with a bouquet of roses as a centerpiece. A small fireplace was across from the couches, and behind them, a similarly tasteful wooden bookshelf was against the wall. Though Sunset wasn't sure why all of the books were in a large pile on the floor instead on the bookshelf where they belonged. No pony knows what's happened, retorted Octavia. Seriously, you're talking about Musica Allegra, one of the biggest enigmas in all of Equestrian history. Didn't she write the national anthem of Equestria? Pointed out Lyra, who wasn't sitting on the couch like a normal pony, but instead slouched away humans with bad posture might sit. But yes, she is the one who wrote In Requiem Asterium Solis, and a bunch of other famous works, but no pony knows what became of her. Why? Asked Sunset. She didn't know what to feel. Frustration was seen to be what she leaned towards the most, but at the same time she was baffled. In one pony counterpart, she could have answered the questions he had about Octavia's heritage, and evidently she mysteriously vanished 1,000 years ago. There's a lot of bad shit that went down 1,000 years ago, which, given you claim to be Equestrian in order, you should know about, said Sandalwood, while pursuing that between the whole ordeal with the Crystal Empire, the Lunar Rebellion, and Civil War, this Musica just got lost in all the chaos. Hi, snapped Octavia. You two have given me enough trouble today because of your interest in cryptozoology. What's that? Sandalwood asked. It's the study of things that supposedly don't exist, snaps Octavia. For example, Lyra's concept of common sense. And since you two have been blathering about your human nonsense, at least let me have a few seconds to talk about music history with somebody who actually wants to know. Seeing a cleared her throat before reciting from memory, Musica Allegra was a unicorn born during the earliest years of the newly founded Dominion of Equestria, a member of the prominent unicorn noble houses whose talents revolved around music. Musica in particular made a name for herself by writing such pieces as Requiem Italian Solace and The Banquet of the Clouds, the former, of course, being named the national anthem by the newly crowned Princess Leslie at the time. However, fate seemed to go against her when she ended up being caught in the Crystal Empire years later when it was seized by King Solomon. While she is one of the few poets known to have managed to escape before it was cursed to violence for 1,000 years, the experience was said to have traumatized her, and certainly after the rise of Nightmare Moon, she simply falls into the pages of history. And no pony knows the most important musician in all of Equestria that simply stopped being relevant. Since it had to insist on making sure that Musica Allegra, both a possible household name in her day and part of an important noble bloodline, just dropped off the face of the earth. Well, all that knows that she was a much different man after she had somehow escaped the fate of the Crystal Empire. Some accounts even stated that after her return from the Crystal Empire, she couldn't even stand to be in the same room as musical instruments or even music itself. Octavia snorted, and so the idea was completely ridiculous. In any case, given the horrors as retold by some of the Crystal Ponies, can you really blame her for wanting to just be some no pony special, as she was thrown from one terrifying war into another in the span of 2 or so months? In place horrible situation, I can say I've been in a similar predicament. Smart Sandalwood was Sunset had to wonder if it had anything to do with what she heard from the other ponies, and if Raspberry had a hell of a nap as well. Well, okay, point is, we answered that question, Lyra impatiently interrupted. Anyway, our turn for asking. Alright, what is it you want to know now? Karen Sensei will sigh. What does this mean, Sue? How does the education system works? All the questions so far have been about how hand works, so it hadn't been too bad. What do humans look like? The Celestial Mare asked. Sunset blinked, trying to comprehend what she was asked. Come again? Simple. What do humans look like? Yeah, sure, Sunset rocked from side to side in her armchair. How much could she reveal? Certainly, given how the existence of humanity wasn't common knowledge, Celestia wanted to keep it under wraps. But Lyra and Sandalwood had already proven they knew a lot about humans from their own limited resources. In fact, based on a sizable collection of documents, books, and other research materials, they were a long way towards figuring out the truth a long time ago, even if she had not arrived back in Equestria itself. Furthermore, they at least answered the question of Musica Allegra's existence somewhat, so even though they kidnapped her, it was just Lyra being paranoid, and Sandy's main right hook had delivered enough comeuppance for that. So, plus, even though Octavia wasn't interested, the presence of the Earth Pony gave Sunset an unintelligent guilt trips over how she last left her cousin, even though it had been a necessary action. Glancing up, Sunset guessed there was enough space between the floor and ceiling for her to try to make an illusionary image of your human form. Okay, stand back. Don't need to tell me twice. Last time I failed giving that type of advice, said Sandalwood, incidentally copying local wise elder figure Sakura's rhyming spirit pattern. Sunset made sure the other 3 ponies were a safe distance away from her, before she closed her eyes and concentrated on generating a magical image of her human form. Only she felt something assault to where her magic was going. She didn't dare cancel the spell. One of the first things she learned about magic was canceling a spell would end poorly if you didn't properly redirect the magic, which you could only do if you knew where the magic was going in the first place. So she realized her front legs were no holding her up, and her face wasn't smashing into the ground. The spell felt finished. Opening her eyes, she noticed the 3 ponies were cowering below her. Looking down at her feet, Sunset realized she somehow turned herself into her human form. It wasn't a perfect transformation. Her skin tone was the same maize hue as her natural fur coat. Mercifully, she was still fully clothed, with pants and undergarments, a shirt, and her inherited bomber jacket. The spell lasted only for a moment, though. Just as she turned human again, She radiated a bright glow and returned to her pony form. What? Gasped Lyra, all excited out of her mind and stunned at what Sunset had done. I honestly don't know, blurted Sunset. Safety had not been her game plan. It freaked her out that she had turned human and back so easily. Look, it'd probably be best if no pony here says a word about this, got it? Well, it'd be the first time, said Sandalwood. Sunset could only wonder just how much the mare got around with her kinds of experience. Well, moving on. Is there anything you wanted to know? Sunset asked as he turned to the former therapist. Well, this might seem silly, but was it saying you were happy with your life as a human? Sunset was at a loss for an answer. First, she was going to answer the affirmative. After all, the entire reason she was here in the first place was to stop Twilight's nightmares from driving her to suicide. But the more Sunset thought about it, the more she could think of ways she wasn't happy compared to her former life as a pony. Before her escape through the mirror, she never had to live a life constructed of lies that even those closest to her could never know. She never had to hide away who she really was or her powers. The small voice in the back of her head made itself known every day, reminding her that no matter how hard she tried, she was always going to be an outcast. Those she held dear would break off all connections with her when they eventually learned the truth she was a midget horse living under the stolen identity of another girl. She always carried this mail about by pointing out her closest friends already knew that stuff. He didn't really care, but the same could not be said for family as he longed for, ever since he understood what being an orphan meant. Sandalwood misinterpreted Sunset's hesitation, immediately trying to come up with a simple answer. It's just something I'm curious about. Such in case some pony else ends up living as a human, we know how easy it is to adapt such a life. Yeah, I get what you mean, but I'm not really sure how to respond given my experience. Well, I think it would be best if we went our separate ways and went to bed, suggested Octavia, still shaken by Sunset's earlier transformation. Wordlessly, the other ponies agreed, and Sunset was on her merry way back to the spare bed at Sugar Cube Corner. But sleep didn't come easy, partly because it had been relatively early, but also because Sunset had spent most of her time curled up in a ball, having a major identity crisis on her hands. Clothes, whatever. Human or a pony? Which do I identify more with? Were her thoughts. She had, since she wanted back in the human world. A home, friends, family. She couldn't just cut ties from her pony's side. True state as a unicorn still very much defined her, no matter what form she was in. But how much of me is still a unicorn anymore? Sleep eventually came to her, uneasily. Celestia, a word. Celestia groggily woke up, looking at her eyes under her sleeping mask, just before pushing it up on her forehead. You couldn't just tuck into my dreams. Why, Lulu? Because this is a very serious matter, Sally, replied the night matriarch. You concerns your former pupil, Sunset Simmer. Celestia's brow furrowed, and her half-asleep gaze took on more of a curious features. What about her? Luna shuffled her front hooves. It's her dreams. As part of my duties, you know it is my job to make sure ponies sleep with a clear conscience, which Sunset currently doesn't have. The point being, how do I say this? To put it bluntly, her dreams are hard for me to read. Sunset set up that remark. Come again? The bird princess sighed. It's like she's partly dreaming like a pony, but partly not. I can't really say I've ever encountered anything like this before. Celestia gave a small smile, because he never encountered a pony who has gone through as much change, Sunset Simmer. Right now, I feel she is on the verge of what I feel is her most daunting challenge yet. One even Twilight has to face. She must challenge her own perceptions of herself. Do you think she can manage? Celestia leaned back on her bed, reapplied her sleeping mask. For good or for ill, I